Hello, and welcome to Power and Policy, the show that dissects global issues with the precision of a surgeon performing a triple bypass on a caffeinated hummingbird. Today we're diving headfirst into the thrilling, terrifying world of trade tensions. Now you might be thinking, trade tensions? John, those sound about as exciting as watching paint dry on a Tuesday. And you know what? You're not wrong. But much like a seemingly harmless mole that turns out to be a highly venomous spider bite, trade tensions, my friends, can have some seriously nasty consequences. The global economy, that delicate, interconnected ecosystem we all rely on, is once again grappling with these rising trade tensions. Think of it like a game of economic Jenga, where every tariff, every sanction is a block pulled from the tower. The United States has been particularly busy slapping tariffs on everything from Chinese steel to Canadian lumber. And naturally, those countries aren't exactly sending thank you notes in return. They're hitting back with their own retaliatory measures. And you know what that means, folks? Buckle up, because we're in for a bumpy ride. Let's start with a sector near and dear to many of our hearts, the auto industry. Now, the auto industry is a bit like that friend we all have who loves to overcomplicate things. They can't just order a pizza. They need to know the exact origin of the pepperoni. See, car manufacturing these days is a global affair. Parts crisscross borders more often than a long-haul trucker with a caffeine addiction. But tariffs, my friends, throw a rather large wrench into the gears of this well-oiled machine. Take, for instance, the tariffs on steel and aluminum. These tariffs, like an unwelcome guest at a dinner party, have increased costs for automakers. And who ultimately ends up footing the bill? That's right, you, the consumer, in the form of higher car prices. Suddenly, that shiny new SUV is looking about as appealing as a week-old burrito. And it's not just the prices. These tariffs can disrupt the entire supply chain. We're talking delays, shortages, and manufacturers scrambling to find alternative suppliers like a pack of squirrels trying to bury their nuts in a concrete jungle. It's a mess, people, a glorious, expensive mess. Now, let's talk about China for a moment, shall we? Specifically their control over rare earth metals. You know, those exotic-sounding elements with names like neodymium and dysprosium that you probably haven't thought about since high school chemistry class? Well, it turns out those elements are pretty damn important. They're used in everything from smartphones and electric cars to wind turbines and guided missiles. And guess who controls the lion's share of the world's rare earth metal production? You guessed it, China. It's like they're holding all the best cards in a high-stakes poker game, and they're not afraid to play them. They've already shown a willingness to restrict exports of these materials, sending shivers down the spines of tech companies and governments around the world. This, my friends, is what we call leverage, and China's got it in spades. The US and other countries are now scrambling to find alternative sources of these critical materials, but it's a bit like trying to find a needle in a haystack while blindfolded and riding a unicycle. Speaking of electric cars, let's zoom in on the EV market, shall we? It's a bit like the Wild West out there with the US and China vying for dominance. The US wants to be the top dog in the EV game, but China's got a head start. They've been investing heavily in EV technology and manufacturing, and they're churning out electric vehicles faster than a popcorn machine at a crowded movie theatre. Now, the US isn't just going to roll over and let China run away with the prize. Oh no, they've got their own plans, which involve things like tariffs on Chinese-made EVs and subsidies for American companies. It's a classic case of economic protectionism, which is a fancy way of saying, we're going to make it harder for you to sell your stuff here so we can sell more of ours. But here's the thing, tariffs, much like that annoying friend who always invites themselves over unannounced, can have unintended consequences. Higher tariffs on Chinese EVs could mean higher prices for American consumers, which could slow down the adoption of electric vehicles. And nobody wants that, right? We need to get those gas guzzlers off the road and replace them with something a little more environmentally friendly. Now, let's talk about something that's near and dear to all of our tech-loving hearts, semiconductors. You know, those tiny little chips that power everything from our smartphones and laptops to our cars and refrigerators. Yeah, those things. Well, it turns out those tiny chips are in high demand these days, and there aren't enough to go around. This semiconductor shortage, much like a bad case of the hiccups, just won't seem to go away. The pandemic threw a wrench into the global supply chain. And while things are slowly getting back to normal, the chip shortage is still causing headaches for businesses and consumers alike. We're talking delayed car production, longer wait times for new phones, and prices for electronics creeping up faster than a raccoon in a dumpster. And guess what's adding fuel to this already raging fire? You guessed it, trade tensions. The United States and China are both trying to become more self-sufficient when it comes to semiconductor manufacturing. But building new chip factories is a bit like building a skyscraper. It takes time, money, and a whole lot of expertise. All right, let's talk energy, shall we? Because nothing says fun like the complex world of oil, gas, and renewable resources. The energy sector, much like a teenager going through puberty, is going through some serious changes right now. We've got countries trying to wean themselves off fossil fuels, the rise of renewables, and of course, good old-fashioned geopolitical maneuvering. Now, trade tensions are like that unpredictable uncle who shows up to a family gathering and throws everyone for a loop. They can disrupt established energy flows, leading to price volatility and uncertainty for producers and consumers alike. Remember that time when oil prices went negative? Yeah, that was wild. And while we're not likely to see that again anytime soon, trade tensions can certainly make things interesting, to say the least. The United States, for example, is trying to become energy independent. They want to produce enough oil and gas domestically so they don't have to rely on other countries. But achieving energy independence is a bit like trying to quit smoking. It's easier said than done. Meanwhile, China is busy securing energy supplies from other countries, diversifying their sources and hedging their bets. Now let's talk about a sector that's near and dear to all of our hearts: healthcare. Because nothing says fun like discussing the rising cost of medicine and the complexities of the global medical supply chain. The healthcare industry, much like a delicate house of cards, relies on a complex web of interconnected supply chains. We're talking pharmaceuticals, medical devices, personal protective equipment. You name it, it's probably manufactured somewhere else and shipped to a hospital near you. But trade tensions, much like a rogue sneeze in flu season, have a nasty habit of disrupting these delicate supply chains. Tariffs and export restrictions can lead to shortages of essential medical supplies, driving up costs and putting lives at risk. Remember the great PPE shortage of 2020? Yeah, nobody wants to repeat that. The pandemic exposed the fragility of the global medical supply chain, and now countries are trying to become more self-sufficient when it comes to healthcare. But building up domestic manufacturing capacity takes time, money, and a whole lot of red tape. And in the meantime, we're all left hoping that the next global health crisis doesn't coincide with a trade war. Now, here's the thing about trade tensions. They're not just a problem for the countries directly involved. Oh no, these things have a nasty habit of spreading like wildfire, impacting economies and businesses around the globe. Think of it like a game of economic dominoes, where one country's tariffs can trigger a chain reaction that topples markets and disrupts supply chains far and wide. The United States-China trade war, for example, has had ripple effects across the globe. Countries like Japan, South Korea, and those in the European Union have all felt the pinch as businesses grapple with uncertainty and adjust their supply chains. It's like trying to navigate a minefield while blindfolded and riding a unicycle. One wrong move and it's game over. And here's the kicker: this global trade shake-up is forcing countries to rethink their alliances and trade relationships. We're seeing a rise in regional trade agreements as countries try to reduce their reliance on global supply chains. It's a bit like a game of economic musical chairs, where everyone's scrambling to find a seat before the music stops. So, there you have it, folks. The global economy, a complex, interconnected web of trade, investment, and increasingly, tension. It's a bit like a roller coaster ride that's simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. We've got tariffs flying, supply chains creaking, and countries scrambling to secure their economic interests. The question is, where do we go from here? Are we heading for a full-blown trade war with economies around the world caught in the crossfire? Or can we find a way to de-escalate tensions, cooperate, and build a more stable and prosperous future for all? Look, I'm not an economist. I'm just a guy who reads the news and tries to make sense of it all. But one thing is clear. The decisions our leaders make today will have far-reaching consequences for years to come. So let's hope they make the right ones, shall we? Because frankly, I'm not sure my heart or my portfolio could handle another global economic meltdown. And on that cheery note, thanks for watching Power and Policy. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the wild world of global issues. See you next time.